My name is Annabella Funk, and I'm the co-founder of Nevada County Abortion Rights with Anna Fernandez, who we just heard play some beautiful music for us. So we're so excited to be here today, and we're here with Kermit Jones, a candidate who believes in a woman's right to choose. We founded NC Abortion Rights because young people deserve a future that is protected and a future that is safe. Because we live in California, NC, or Nevada County Abortion Rights, we work to fundraise for the National Network of Abortion Funds. It's a network that's a grassroots organization, and it funds independent clinics in places that really need the funding. It's so important now more than ever. So we feel that the most important actions you can take are canvassing, calling your senators, and voting, especially in the midterms. So without further ado, I want to welcome a candidate endorsed by the California Democratic Party, Vote for Vets, and the California Labor Party. Dr. Kermit Jones is a former member of the U.S. Navy and a family doctor. Jones worked at the White House under President Barack Obama to improve the quality of care for our veterans. He runs on a platform of reducing the cost of prescription drugs, creating public health insurance options, and protecting a woman's right to choose. So let's hear it for California 3rd Congressional District candidate, Dr. Kermit Jones.
First, I've never been at a function as a candidate where someone was singing and singing so beautifully. And I have to admit, it was kind of cool to feel as if that was my song, but I know it wasn't. It was, even though someone kind of told me that. I think it was a song to kind of make sure that we had a beautiful call to action. One of the things that the speaker just said now, I think resonated very closely with me because I believe that our rights are under threat. Our children are under threat. Our democracy is under threat. But I'm hopeful because I know we have an opportunity for change. We had an opportunity in 2020 and we stood up and stepped up and we got a person out of office that demonstrated multiply that they cared more about themselves than they did our country. And I think now we have an opportunity to make sure that we continue in the right direction in terms of our democracy. Biden has only been in office 16 months. And while it's not been an easy 16 months, there have been many things that have happened that demonstrate that we need people that are leaders and not politicians in office. We had, for the first time in 70 years, a war break out in Europe that rivaled the wars of World War II, where one country invaded another sovereign country, and if I remember correctly, the previous president withheld about $500 million worth of funds for a country that Congress, a duly elected equal branch of government, had designated would help the security of not just that country, but the security of NATO, the security of the values that we stand for around the world, and the security of all of us even here at home. So we had one person that was willing to put all of our security at risk just so they stayed in office and got dirt on their challengers. And we have other people that I feel have answered the call to what we are looking for and what we need as a country. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Kermit Jones. I am an internal medicine physician who's treated over 20,000 patients, and I'm also a Navy veteran that deployed to Iraq between 2007 and 2009 with the Marine Helicopter Squadron. I grew up on a small farm where my family focused on not just blueberries, but also cows. And most importantly, my mom was a home health nurse for about 30 years and took care of everyone in the community, including our neighbor, Mr. Brown, who helped set up our farm and eventually, unfortunately, had terminal colon cancer. And my mom was one of the last people to take care of him before he passed away. It was my mom's example of taking care of everyone in our community that drove me to want to become a doctor, to have the type of relationships that she had with her patients. I was about 11 years old when I saw my mom give one of her patients CPR and resuscitate her. I tell people that I was taught by my mom to put in IVs at 12, which probably was not, I don't know, considered proper things that your parents teach you at 12 years old. But she was slowly introducing me to the idea of what I could do if I believed in myself and I worked hard and I had a community that worked around me to see me achieve. I went to medical school at Duke. I went to medical school and law school, and the third year of that program was 9/11. And when I sat in a blood bank that was on campus and decided what to do next, like so many other people trying to figure out what happened to our country, I decided I would join the Navy and try to help take care of those people that were answering the call and giving everything to take care of us and make sure that we were safe. After I finished my time with the Marines and finished in 2009, I had the privilege of serving in the Obama administration as a White House fellow, and I worked on veterans issues and healthcare innovation issues, trying to make sure that people that have some of the rarest and most challenging to treat diseases get the treatments that they need based upon the innovations that we're developing. A few years later, my mom ended up being one of those patients when she was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, even though she never smoked. And what kept her alive was new treatments that had not been available just a few years before. But what also kept her alive was having a son that was a doctor and also a lawyer, and had also worked in the Obama administration. And what that experience taught me was, first, my mom was not getting a fair shake in our healthcare system without me. And second, most people don't have me to advocate for their healthcare. And so we have a problem in our healthcare system. If you need someone who's a physician or someone who's in healthcare to navigate the system for you, it's too complex, it costs too much, not enough people get access to it, and many people suffer needlessly in the healthcare system that we currently have. That was one of the reasons and motivations for me to run for Congress. That experience, whether it was my mom's or many of my other patients who can't afford their medications, or taking care of a loved one and trying to decide how they're going to pay the mortgage or pay for their medications, or the experiences of my 7-year-old son who, during the Dixie Fire last year, couldn't go outside for about 6 weeks because the air quality was worse than it was in some developing countries, or some of my patients who lost their homes, or some of the people that I took care of that had been evacuated and had to leave their homes so quickly that they left all their medications at home, or a gentleman that I took care of at a church in our district who had suffered second-degree burns on his feet while he was running out as fast as he could. Basically, the failed policies of doing nothing over the last 20 to 50 years with respect to climate change, with respect to the fires, with respect to the drought, basically with respect to those things that you basically would expect your elected leaders to do. That's the situation that we're in right now. That's why I'm running for Congress. I'm running for Congress because I have a lot of people, maybe even some of them in this district or in this room that are part of our district, that are trying to figure out how they're going to retire. The markets keep going up and down. Some people thought they were going to retire and they lost a lot of money. Or some people worked for decades and never had enough money to retire. Or we have some people that during the pandemic they lost their jobs and they can't get another job comparable to what they had before. We have some people who lost loved ones during the pandemic. I lost my first cousin who was a nurse in Chicago during the first wave of COVID. While on one side you had people that were denying that it even existed, or that masks work, or vaccines are real, you had over 1 million Americans that eventually died of a disease that eventually becomes pretty preventable for most people, or at least if not preventable, becomes treatable. So we suffer from a lot of things in our country, from disinformation, from an epidemic of gun violence, from trying to make sure that our kids and our communities are safe. And when I look at these things, and I look at the training that I got in the military, the training I got as a physician 17 years ago, I realize that most people now are about fed up. They're about fed up voting for politicians, and they're ready to vote for leaders. People are tired of voting for people and putting them in office that care more about staying in office and care more about career climbing than they do the constituents that they've been elected to represent. They're tired of people who are willing to do everything they can to make sure they remember all the talking points of their party, but they forget all of the cries of help of their constituents and the people that are begging them to do something. That's why I'm running for office, because I've heard from people that said that they've talked to representatives, whether it was in this county or in other counties of our district, and if you didn't hail from their party, they wouldn't even call on you. They would ignore you, as if you weren't part of the district that they were represented to elect. Some of you have probably had homes that have either burnt down or been threatened to burn down. That's why one of the things that we're focusing on is a federal fire insurance plan that's much more affordable than the California plan that we have now. We're focusing on tax breaks and incentives to make it so that people can harden their homes. We know that for people that can spend $2,500 to $3,000 and can harden their home and create homes out of cinder blocks and these other types of things, create defensible space, they're less likely to have their house burned down. But how many people can raise their hand and say that they got $3,000 they can just set aside for that? The federal government can do some things very well, and other things they need a little bit of help. And they need that help by listening to the people that are on the ground, listening to communities, listening to their constituents. We, thankfully, were able to put about $6 trillion into the economy during COVID. And I was told $1 trillion is about, if you put, I think it's $100 bills stacked on top of each other from here to the moon, that's about $1 trillion. We did that 6 times, putting that money into the economy during COVID. So if we can put that much money into our economy for that, I think we have money for healthcare. We have money for fire insurance. We have money to do proper forest management. I think we have money that we can help keep in people's pockets when it comes to inflation. From the grocery store to the gas pump, prices have been going up, and a lot of people simply can't afford it. So that's why I say we need people that have real-life, practical experience in Congress. You know, I looked at it. I saw that I have a couple of people that I'm going to be debating next week. I'm running against Scott Jones and Kevin Kiley. And when I was in Iraq in 2007, I'm not sure Kevin Kiley could vote while I was protecting our democracy. We are at a point, I believe, in our election cycle where if we stand up and we fight, if we go to the ballot box, if we actually show up, we can win. This district is winnable.
Yay.
Yeah.
This isn't the Malfa's district. This isn't McClintock's district. This is your district.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
This district is 8.5 points bluer than it's ever been. We haven't had these chances since Charlie Brown ran in 2008.
That's right.
We got a real shot. Now, how many of you have turned in your ballots already? How many of you just raise your hands because I said that? Come on now, we got to have you turn in those ballots, because what we have is 33% Dems, 37% Republicans, about 28% declined this state, and some of those are Republicans and some of those are Democrats. If we don't show up, this game is over for me June 8th. I mean that. And we put a lot of work into this. But if we show up, our polling shows that we win. That's big. Showing up means you're going to turn in your ballots, you're going to call people, you're going to knock on doors. And for those of you that can afford it, hopefully you can contribute something to our campaign. And that is also really important. We obviously need you to vote. Some of you have seen the TV ad that we just put up, kind of highlighting the privilege I had to serve and what I want to do later. That ad cost about $100,000. That's not a cheap ad. And that's not us just spending willy-nilly and being extravagant. That's how much and how expensive it is to run an ad in 3 different media markets. Until we get campaign finance reform, until we have fully publicly funded campaigns, until we get rid of Citizens United, until we have until we have transparency, until we get rid of the lobbyists, until we do these things, we need to count on you to win. We've been good so far. We've raised $1.3 million, and that's because of a lot of time on the phone, a lot of y'all looking at our website and contributing. But we got another $3 million we got to raise before November, and that's a lot of money. So what you can do towards that is anything you can give is going to go towards our staff. It's going to go towards our signs that y'all keep emailing us about. It's going to go towards those ads. It's going to go towards our field operation, and it's going to go towards making sure that we win. So I'm not one of those people that talks forever and ever, because I know you get tired of just looking up at me and not engaging. And with that, I'd like to just open this up to everyone in the room. First, thank you again for giving me this opportunity, because it really is a privilege to stand up here and be your flag bearer. And I really mean that. This isn't something that I'm doing to put me in that office. I'm doing something to put us in that office. Okay. So thank you for that, and I'd love to take your question.
While the questions get gathered, I'll start off with describe this new district that we're in, because it's District 3 and it's very different from what many of us thought the old one looked like.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Eric. When we started and opened this campaign in September, 2 days before the 20th anniversary of 9/11, we were running against McClintock. It was a district that he had won by 12 points before. But we told people, look, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't fight. We raised $315,000 that quarter, which got a few people's attention nationally. And then the next quarter, while we were waiting to see what redistricting looked like, we found out that they made this new district, California's 3rd Congressional District. And by they, I mean the people in this room that fought and advocated and stood in front of the committees and said that you deserve representation.
Yeah.
So because of that, we went from an R+12 to R+4 district. And that possibly may even be a R+3 or less. And I say that because that's based on 2020 data, and people have been moving to this district from the Bay since then. It is still 10 counties, like the old CD4. It is the longest district in California. Geographically, it's the same size as West Virginia. You didn't realize you'd have as much in common with West Virginia. And it runs from Plumas County, Sierra County in the north, and Nevada, all the way down to Mono and Inyo County, which we were at a few weeks ago, all the way down to Death Valley. It includes Mount Whitney, which I hiked 3 times, and I may have to do it again right after I win. And it's 50% suburban and 50% rural. Yep. So we have a large group of people to represent, but all of you have a lot in common. You don't want your houses to burn down.
No.
Right? You've worked all your life and you deserve good health insurance and health care.
Yay.
You're paying too much at the pump and you're paying too much for your groceries. These are all things that you have in common whether you live in Roseville or you live here or you live in Mono or Inyo County, and that's why those are all things that we're going to fix. And you, I'm pretty confident, have loved ones, whether it's children or siblings, children like my children or grandchildren, that you want to be safe to go to school.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That you want to be safe to get their groceries. That you don't want to get killed in the country that they were born in, that's supposed to be the most powerful country in the world.
Yeah.
So you got a lot in common across this district. And that's why we're fighting for every single one of those things.
On that note, what are your top proposals for common sense gun safety legislation that you think would garner bipartisan support?
You know, it's good that you added that last part to that, right? Because there's been a significant amount of, I'd say, inertia to move anything down the aisle or across the aisle. You know, as a father, as a son, as a husband, I feel it's a privilege that I get to literally walk my 7-year-old son to school. And it's a privilege, apparently more than I realized, to be able to see him come back home. That some people don't have anymore. There is movement. I even read an article about a Republican member of Congress, which you can Google, I think he's out of New York. There is movement right now to raise the age that people can purchase firearms in our country.
Yeah.
That's not going to fix every problem, but when we look at the age of people that are committing some of the most heinous crimes that you could imagine, they're mostly between 18 and 21. Which for those of you in medicine and public health know, unfortunately, is that period where the frontal lobes just aren't really that developed yet. You know, that's why we do so many silly things between 18 and 21. Right?
Right.
I think there's bipartisan support for that, but there's also bipartisan support for something else. You know, we have a lot of people on the other side of the aisle that keep saying that there's a mental health problem. And there is one. We saw during the pandemic, people being separated caused a lot of serious mental health issues. There is movement for more mental health services, for expanding. As a primary care physician, as someone who has treated people for multiple medical ailments, as someone myself who had my own challenges with PTSD after coming back from Iraq the second time, I feel that we have an opportunity to actually call people's bluff on this. If there are people in Congress and other places that feel that this is mostly a mental health issue and not a guns issue, and I think there are situations with both, we need to hold their feet to the fire and say, hey, you need to vote, put legislation forward for significant improvement in mental health funding. How about $100 billion? Governor Abbott, you know, I look at it. If you say this is principally a mental health issue, put the legislation forth for $100 billion put towards mental health. I want to see it, right? I think there's a lot of, I'm sorry?
Have Bill Gates match it.
Why not? I think they would. So I think there's a lot of movement that can be done on this.
I want to see the NRA match it.
Yeah, raising the age, you know, making it so that people can't get access to weapons of war. Expanded background checks. I think there's a large amount of support across the country for these types of things. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to find common ground to first and foremost keep our kids safe.
Yeah.
And keep our communities safe.
On that topic of mental health, how would you address the need for psychological support of the unhoused people in our community?
Of the, you mean
Unhoused.
unhoused. Okay, I just want to make sure I heard you. Yeah, I think that is unfortunately part of the reasons that they are unhoused. 1 in 10 veterans are unhoused. And there is studies that say that the longer someone is unhoused, the less likely it's going to be able to put them in a home. We know that being in a home is part of what actually helps people from a health and mental health standpoint. If you're in a home and you're stable there, especially if you have issues with addiction, you're less likely to use. You're more likely to make your appointments. You have a stable place where you can interact with people. So I think there are some great proposals, whether it's a proposal to try to do things similar to what's done in the VA. There's what's called a Project Turnkey program that makes it so that if you're a veteran and you finally get into the VA system, you also get an opportunity to get vouchers to help out with some of your rent. I think those same types of things can be matched with people that are unhoused. You know, we want to make sure we keep our communities safe. Our communities aren't safe if people are sleeping on the streets. They're just not. Those people aren't safe, and the people around them are not safe. So this is part of the larger public health problem that we have. Having people that can't afford their homes, having people that are out in the streets, having people that don't have access to mental health or opioid addiction. You know, there are some people that really want to get help with some of the serious problems that they have, but you know, some of the clinics aren't open when they're at work. So we need to figure out ways to expand those as well to give people greater access.
what strategies would you suggest for handling the
Some
national
of the
debt?
first things that we need to make sure of is that we no longer put ourselves in a situation where at one point it was up to 12 or 15% of our debt and our treasuries were owned by China, by one of our adversaries. That puts us in a national security situation. I think we need to very seriously look at ways that we can cut back some of the spending that we're doing that may not actually be helping our economy, be making things worse. Oops, sorry. Some of that needs to be by making products cheaper in the United States, expanding our economy. You know, we had a lot of supply lines that went through Asia and China. 70% of the chips are made overseas. And what that does is that really does help drive inflation. And if inflation drives up, then mortgage prices go up, interest rates go up, the interest on our debt goes up, and everything actually gets worse. So if we focus on tackling inflation, we focus on bringing some of those jobs back here, we focus on bringing some of those supply lines back here, and we actually focus on making it so that we can afford more things as a government and we're not spending in debt, then I think we can help our national debt situation and we don't end up saddling our kids and our grandchildren with debt.
For climate change, what is your plan to combat oil companies' efforts to keep drilling and manufacturing, combat the efforts to keep drilling and manufacturing more single-use plastics?
You know, I think a lot of the things that we can do is actually make it so that we have alternative energy sources, supply and subsidize those things, like the Biden administration's been doing. And many of you have probably benefited from, just like me. When we were having our house built, I benefited from the tax subsidy. I think it was $10,000 at that time to help pay for our solar, which takes about 65% and sometimes 70% of our energy production. I think we can do the same thing with respect to miles per gallon and gas usage. We can help subsidize the sustainable energy industry, and we can also make it so that renewables and EV cars are more affordable for people. I think if we increase the supply of alternatives to petroleum, then we'll actually meet the demand that's there for it and make it less likely we're doing that. I also think that we need to seriously look at some of the things that have been proposed with respect to cap and trade and dividends, making it so that if people are going to continue to use fossil fuels, that the actual negative externalities of that use, whether it's increasing the risk of heart disease, which happens when you're breathing some of these fumes, or lung disease and these other types of things, are actually internalized by the people that are producing them. So that's why I support a cap and trade and dividend type system on top of addressing some of the issues in the short term, medium, and long term, and making it so that people can produce their energy more locally with microgrids, stop transmitting energy over long distances, which we see also increases the fire risk, and also makes it more expensive to use it in the first place.
Your proposals there half answer this next question, but would you like to respond to the accusations of accepting bribes from Exxon?
That's one of the things that I wouldn't repeat, but you repeated it, and I guess some of you have probably gotten that mail out. My first thing when I saw it was a little disappointment because I had met this gentleman before and was as cordial with him as I have with anyone else, so wouldn't have expected him to try to defame me as a person. Since I went to law school, I understand the definition of what would meet the criteria for defamation of a public official, which is you either openly put things out there that you know are false, or you have a reckless disregard for the truth. And so that is the legal definition in the state of California. And actually what he's saying meets both of those. One, my FEC filings are fully available. I actually had someone ask me about it a little earlier today. So you can see everywhere that I've gotten money. Unlike that gentleman, because he was actually hit with a letter from the FEC that he's actually filed no filings. So this person's already breaking campaign finance law. Interestingly enough, I wouldn't be surprised by that. And then second, just to get down to brass tacks, there's a way that you try to campaign and I'd say convince people, and there's a way that you don't. The tactics that we didn't like the most with Trump was that no matter what you told him, he lied. The disgust of those types of tactics are the same whether you're a Democrat or Republican or independent. That's not democracy. It's not democracy to lie about people. Also, a bribe is a felony. And so it's kind of hard to argue that what's fully available publicly would be considered a bribe. So I haven't taken any money from oil companies. I haven't taken any bribes from oil companies. And again, I haven't taken, I think, the low road of focusing on those things that I know are just divisive and going to confuse people. That's why our campaign has always been about what we're going to do, who I am as a person, and what my record is, not about lies. So what we're happy about is that we had a lot of our supporters come out to us and tell us, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. I said, me too. And so, when we had, legal counsel send a cease and desist order to this gentleman, we expected him to, abide by it, which is you can't tell lies that are defamation against someone just because you're losing. If you get no delegates to vote for you and no one's interested in your campaign, that's not the reason to start lying. You run the campaign to demonstrate what you're going to do, like I said, not falsities, and that's not what we're about.
The Supreme Court is obviously on everyone's mind, given their leaked potential draft decision. Do you have any thoughts pertaining to increasing the number of Supreme Court justices?
That's an interesting question. The first thing that I focus on is how are we going to make sure that the federal government stays out of the exam room when women are making some of those consequential decisions of their life. The Supreme Court is just, some unelected people that are a branch of government that, we rely on to be unbiased and to interpret the law in a way in which it actually respects people's constitutional and human rights. And I'd say if what they're coming out with is actually accurate with that draft leak opinion, I don't think they're doing either of those. I really don't.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave the expansion or contraction or whatever the Supreme Court to the President of the United States, because that is in the executive branch's purview and trying to deal with that. That's not in my purview as a member of the House of Representatives. But what I can say is in my purview as a physician and someone who's running for this office is that I will fight every single day to make sure that a woman has a right to choose.
Yay.
I tell people when the person that was the most inspirational mentor in my life, which was my mom, was in her advanced calculus class with my dad, and she was the only woman, she got the highest grade out of like 20 people in that class. I don't even know what advanced calculus is. So what that shows me is the power, the beauty, and the ability, the intelligence and intellect of at least half of our population if you just give them a damn chance.
Let's go for a little out of left field one. Do you support permanent daylight savings time?
I was wondering what was going to come out of your mouth. I don't know enough about it. I'm not going to pretend to. I'm so used to it switching back and forth and, get annoyed when it's moving forward when I want it to move backward. But I don't know enough about it to say either way, to be honest with you. But it's a funny question. I like whoever posed that.
On the topic of elections and voting rights, we've got a election denier running for clerk recorder here against a very qualified member of the office. What would you do to strengthen voting rights, voting protections, and what could Congress do to help protect elections at the local level?
Yeah, I think Congress can can pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act at the senatorial level. So a lot of our fellow citizens in the southern states will have the same protections we have out here. I think another thing that Congress can do is it can actually and fully fund some of the executive branch offices that we have that fight disinformation. Because this is really what that's about. We had the previous president for literally 60 days try as hard as they can to overturn votes, to find me votes, all these other types of things. And what we saw out of that is, unfortunately, there's a significant amount of the population, even one of them being one of the opponents I'm running against, Kevin Kiley, who has not ever said publicly that the currently duly elected president was elected fairly in our democracy. He gets angry when you ask him about it. So I think there's still people spreading this and misinformation. And so what the best thing that we can do is fund those efforts to make sure that people get the right information and that we're holding our social media organizations accountable so they're not used as conduits to incite violence, to encourage people to storm the Capitol, and to also threaten people. I know some of the people, like that person that's running, people like me on Twitter, I mean, have been threatened.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's not free speech, that's hate speech. And so what we need is to hold people accountable to do that and try to scare people out of exercising their constitutional right to have a voice and to not let that voice be taken away from any of us.
Did you hear about the recent inaugural Armed Forces Day in Grass Valley with the flyovers and recruitment from the military branches? And if so, do you have any thoughts on that event?
I do not. I don't have any thoughts on it. I think while it was going on, I was out of town. But was there something specific about it that happened?
I'm not sure based on there's no further context for the question, but another question touches on the same thing, that there are 2 bills in Congress for peace building efforts in the United States and outside. Are you familiar with them and would you support them?
I couldn't say if I supported them until I was actually familiar with them. I'm not familiar with those 2 bills, but I will look into them. You know, we try to keep abreast of as many things as we can, but as you probably realize, running a campaign is almost a 24-hour type of thing. So while we're trying to keep up with things, we do sometimes miss things. So if whoever wrote that question wants to shoot an email to the info email on our account, a little information about it, you know, then we may be able to get back to that pretty soon. But thank you for posing the question.
Sorry, trying to parse some stuff here. Back to the issue of, I guess, both Nevada County being rural, somewhere in the middle between, it's certainly not as urban as Placer, but it's not quite as rural as Plumas, let's say. How would you handle the differences in all of the communities that you would have to represent? Because as the map shows over there, it is potentially the largest in the state. I haven't calculated the square miles.
It is. It's the largest in the state. Yeah, I mean, I would handle it by, you know, we're going to need to continue to do as much as we can to get out and talk to people. Like I said, a month ago, we're in Plumas. Last week, we're in Mono and Inyo County. So we try to get out there as much as we can. But a lot of the issues really are the same. And we really try to focus on a lot of those things that came up and came to this state and our district with the infrastructure bill. We got billions of dollars for broadband, which makes a big difference in rural areas where they need to access either healthcare or educational services for kids in the home. We got tons of millions of dollars, I don't know the exact amount, for water quality as well. And so those are things that are going to help people, whether they're in, you know, Lincoln or whether they're in, you know, here in Grass Valley. So we want to make sure that we work with the Board of Supervisors and the local officials to get that money in the places that they need as quickly as possible. We also, again, you know, want to emphasize those things that need to be done because there are a lot of areas of our district that have mostly federal lands, federal forest land there. Plumas has about 70% of the entire county is federal forest land, and also in Mono and Inyo County, in some areas up to 90% is federally owned. And so what that means is, one, their tax base is less. It's a lot smaller than the size of the county, so it makes it harder for them to raise funds, which means in many instances they probably could use a little bit more help from the federal government, especially if places burn down. And second, in terms of fire risk, in the state of California, the forest ecology experts say we have about 20 million acres of forest that needs to have fuel reduction, so we lower the risk of these fires that are cresting the Sierras and burning down whole towns in literally hours. And so the only way that we do that is to actually hold the federal government's feet to the fire, regardless of whatever administration is in office, and make sure they're fully funding the Federal Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, making sure that they're supporting the firefighters, working with their state counterparts to do the mechanical thinning and prescribed burns, and also biomass production. When we were in Sierra County about a month ago, we saw a biomass plant that they said to us, I think they could do upwards of maybe 10,000 acres possibly a year. And I think I may have that number slightly wrong. But still, it kind of highlights the fact that they were actually employing people in the district that were producing sustainable fuel sources by lowering the risk of fires in those areas, and not knocking down the large trees that are more fire resistant, but the smaller ones that can actually help the fire go up into the canopy. So I think there are a lot of great things that we can do that are the same whether you live in Roseville, or whether you live in Plumas County, or whether you live, like I said, in Death Valley.
As a follow-on to that question of representing diverse communities, have you had any specific outreach or contact with local indigenous groups like the Maidu or the Pomo or the Nisenan? And there's one other tribal name on here I can't
the
read.
Miwok?
Miwok,
Miwok's
yes.
another one. Yeah, we got endorsed by a board of supervisor in Alpine County, Irvin Jim, who's part of the Miwok tribe. We've met with members of some of the indigenous tribes here, not just to learn how we could help them, but also to learn from them. As many of you know, these tribes had been managing these lands, long before any of our ancestors got here. And I think there's a lot to learn from how they did that. And some of them were doing prescribed burns and doing things in ways in which they understood the important relationship between their communities and the forests around them. And so I think engaging them, making sure that they have the access to healthcare and education and everything that they need in their communities, and making sure they have access to those jobs as well, will keep us stronger as a community.
Here's another maybe fun one. How do you manage an MD and JD from Duke at the same time?
It's a lot of reading. It was a combined degree 6-year program where you put part of your time in one school and part of your time in the other, and then just a semester of both of them at the same time. And it was a pretty awesome opportunity because the first couple of years I was learning about surgery and taking care of people in the hospital. And then the next few years I was learning about policy, and since those next couple of years were also at the time of 9/11, I was also learning about proper use of force and national security and engagement in foreign affairs. So it was a unique opportunity in the early 2000s to understand healthcare policy, drug development, how the U.S. government interacts with the rest of the world, and how we can keep ourselves safe at home. And from that, I became a member of the California Bar, worked at a law firm trying to get life-saving drugs in the market, and then finished my residency and have been working in Northern California, serving our community as a physician for the last 5.5 years.
What is your position on Medicare for all and also improving healthcare delivery and containing costs for healthcare?
Yeah, this is one of the reasons I ran. On my website, you'll find the most comprehensive healthcare plan of anyone who's ever run for Congress. And it's informed by people that worked in the healthcare system, and that's really important to me. Because a lot of what we see in healthcare, when we hear people talk about it, when we hear politicians talk about it, when you ask them, how many people have you taken care of in the healthcare system? How many hospital rooms have you had to work an extra shift in as a nurse? How many times did you, as a medical assistant, have to do things that you otherwise were not trained to do, but there was no one else to do them? And the overwhelming majority of them will say no. And so that's why when I wanted to run for Congress, I wanted to ask people, like the head of the School of Public Health at Columbia. I wanted to ask people like one of the past presidents of the American Medical Association, surgeons, geriatricians, pediatricians, nurses. These are the people I asked when I wrote my healthcare plan that's on our website. So that's why I say it really is one of the most comprehensive. I support universal health care. I support making sure that everyone has access to care. I have a public option, and the reason why I have a public option is because I feel that for those people that want to keep their insurance, I don't have a legal right to take it away from them. I just don't. And for people that I do take their insurance away from them, there's going to be all hell to pay when they come and vote against that bill just for that very sake. But what I think the federal government can do is they can offer a plan that is like a Medicare for All plan, that is a public option. And if you like that plan better than any other plan that's out there, you go into that plan. And the rest of the plans will fail because no one will be in them. I mean that. We have to hold everyone accountable, including the federal government. So if we give the federal government a chance and say, look, come up with a plan that would be the plan that everyone could have, and people have the option of getting into it. Because everyone loves choice in this country. And if it's a better plan that lowers the cost, that makes it so everyone has access, that makes it so that you're not denied care, I assure you that every single person will jump into that plan. And that's why that's our approach. And not just that, but we focus on quality. We focus on using technology. We found during COVID, and there were a lot of studies that showed that people that had home health care workers at home, or they were in small nursing homes that only had 4 or 5 people, were 60% less likely to get COVID. People that were getting hospital level care, which Hopkins has proven that they can do, and a few other institutions have proven that they can do at home, were actually less likely to get COVID, less likely to get infectious diseases than people that were in nursing homes and people that were in hospitals. So we do need to fund our hospitals and make sure that they're there when we have acute care, but we also need to fund our home health care system so that people can get their care where they feel most comfortable. Everyone would rather get their care at home than be at a hospital for days on end where they don't need to be. So that's why that's part of our healthcare plan, including fully funding our public health system, fully funding our mental health system, fully funding opioid and other types of addictions that need to be addressed. So take a look at our plan. Like I said, it really is a well thought out plan that looks at multiple areas of our healthcare system, not just the insurance aspect, but the quality aspect and the cost aspect as well.
We had a question in here about the opioid crisis. Do you have any specific comments on it, or do you think your statements stand?
Yeah, I'd say this is a crisis that we can beat, but we're only going to be able to beat it if we take it seriously. We're not taking it seriously by just talking about it and then not holding some of those companies accountable that helped fuel it. We're not taking it seriously if we don't provide free addiction services to people. There's some people that can't afford to pay $15,000 or $20,000 to get clean with respect to this stuff. And if they can't afford that, they end up using heroin if they can't afford the oxy that they've been using. So if we put forth real plans, which we talk about, so we no longer have people that are, young kids that are stringing out on this stuff, or middle-aged people that are dying on fentanyl, then I think that we can actually solve a lot of these problems and be better as a society.
How do you feel about law enforcement reform?
So I think the law enforcement works best when it works with our communities. and that we help each other make it so that we can get to a point in which we're both safe. I respect law enforcement. I tell people, I have my own personal stories where my mom, before they left for the farm, where they were trying to run a small corner store in Chicago, and they got held up 3 times. And I would have loved for the police to arrest the person that put a gun in my mom's face. So we need a police department. We are proud that we've been endorsed by PORAC, the Peace Officers Research Association, which is one of the largest police unions in California. And we think that happened because we understand that we do need to support, we do need to fund. And part of that support is making sure that criminals, aren't more armed than our police. But then we also know that every single segment of society also has to have accountability. So, we welcome those things that are done to make sure that there's oversight so that, the good cops can continue to be out there and doing their jobs, and the ones that are not the good cops can be removed. That we have things like, the body cameras and other things that are out there to make it so that people are being accountable. And a lot of the police force supports that as well. So we think if we work together with them, we make it so that we can look at alternative ways that people are, being addressed in terms of police and correction and stuff like that, then we can get to a point in which we don't necessarily always have to use lethal force. There are many instances in which you don't have to pull out a gun. The best instance may be that you have a mental health worker or someone else who's there that can kind of help people with some of these issues.
How about this person is concerned about banks and financial institutions having been deregulated over the past 40 years, resulting in the crash of 2008, among other things. Do you have any comments about the financial sector?
The importance of us accomplishing those things together that we know we can't do by ourselves. So whoever you are, name in or fill in the ethnicity that you want to fill in. You can't put out 20,000 acre fire by yourself. Fill in the gender that you want. You want your relatives and your children to have a better, more successful life than you did. And so I think those things, whether it's making sure that you can afford goods and it doesn't keep going up, that you can feel safe in your home and in your communities, that you are actually feeling as if we're bending the curve on climate change. I think those are things that the overwhelming majority of people, not just in this county, but in this district, in state, and I honestly believe in this country, believe in. There are just some people that may have been listening to some of the wrong radio stations and watching the wrong TV news stations, that are out there. But we all want the same thing. We really do. And so I think the way that you reach many of them is you meet them where they are, you listen to them and help them accept that you actually do care about what they have to say, and that we are working to make their lives better, even if we don't agree with how to get there.
We've hit the hour mark, so just a couple more questions here. What are your ideas about representatives and senators and insider trading and trying to increase accountability, as you've spoken?
Yeah, I think the same laws on insider trading that apply to everyone else, the SEC laws should apply to members of Congress. They should not be able to trade on non-publicly available information. I think we need to make sure that we do have a robust ethics and legal system to make it so that if someone does do that, they have to give those funds back and even pay a fine. And I think if we do that, we can make sure that we do have a fair playing field. We don't have people like what happened last time, in which they sell a bunch of shares right before the market collapses.
And so with that, just a couple campaign-related questions. Will Steve Kerr endorse you, and are there any other big endorsements that you'd like to touch?
I don't know, but that'd be great. But we are working through convincing people in this district, state, and country as to why joining our movement for change. And having the Democratic Party really, I think, look at rural areas as part of the field of play, so to speak, in terms of our democracy, a little bit closer. Because there are a lot of people that move into our district that believe in fair representation, that believe in making sure that climate change doesn't make our country and world unlivable, that believe in addressing the fires, and believe in healthcare, and all these other types of things. We just need to make sure that we do this in a way in which people really understand the importance of it and really believe that we are speaking to them where they are and making sure that we're bringing them along with us wherever we go.
And the ultra pragmatic question, do you have donation envelopes?
Yes, we do.
MP Manager Michaela over there. So with that, I think I'll end the official Q&A. If I didn't ask your question specifically, if I paraphrased it too much, I apologize. Just trying to get through a lot here. Thank you, Dr. Kermit Jones, for coming and joining us.
Oh, sure, of course.
Thanks for coming out.
Thank you. Thanks for the song.
People are welcome to stay and socialize or do as they wish. That was the end of our program. Thank you so much,
Can I
everyone.
get one too? Can you take one?
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming out here.
No, thank you. This was all Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
That's fun.
So I want to make sure appropriate people.
I'll take a look at it, and like I said, I never say I'm opposed to that.